Hello, I'm Muriel Bowser. I'm the Mayor of Washington, D.C. We are in City Hall, and I'm joined by members of my Cabinet and Public Safety team. We have just concluded a briefing to the Council of the District of Columbia and a regular Mayor-Council breakfast. Today, we've reported on the district's preparations for the election day of November 5th. As well as the period between Election Day and the inauguration on January the 20th. So with that, we're happy to answer a few questions. Yes.
I know we talked a lot about the inauguration and January 6th as well. For election night, are there any, can you go into a little bit of depth of what any extra protocols or safety looks like for election night?
Sure, and I'll turn to Pamela Smith, who is the Chief of Police, to talk about MPD's regular support for the Board of Elections and voters. But I should remind everybody in Washington, D.C., today is Election Day. The last day to vote is November 5th. A couple of weeks ago, the Board of Elections sent every registered voter a ballot. Those ballots can be returned by U.S. mail in a Board of Elections drop box or at a voting center on Election Day. Voting centers open on this Monday, the 28th. Monday, the 28th. So please check the Board of Elections website for the voting center that you want to use. So early voting begins this Monday. And voting centers will be open on Election Day on Tuesday. So everybody go vote. MPD has a normal support role for the Board of Elections to support precincts if there's any issue at a precinct, but also to support election workers as they get the votes to the central BOE location. Yes.
Hi, Mayor Bowser. Gabe Cohen from CNN.
Hi.
I appreciate you taking the question and going through all of that information in the briefing. All three of you discussed preparations, running through different scenarios, and even anticipating political violence. As you are preparing for January 6th and the weeks leading up to it, given that former President Trump is primarily the one spreading a lot of misinformation to people across the country about election integrity, do you find yourself preparing different scenarios for if President Trump wins, former President Trump wins, or if Kamala Harris wins?
Well, I think that our preparations, the first thing that in terms of information sharing that I think is important for our voters to know and voters around our nation to know is we may not have a declared winner on election night. In fact, almost nobody thinks we're going to have a winner declared. Now, you could have a landslide and Kamala Harris is declared the victor at the end of the day, or, there could obviously be another scenario. So I think that the biggest thing that I would ask people to exercise is patience, that the way the process works in some of these states is they don't start counting the early votes until the day of the election. So it's important to know that is expected, and that in fact would be normal, that we don't have a call out of Pennsylvania, for example, on election night. So we would ask people to just be patient, that the votes are being counted, and that process has to play itself out to be patient. So that's what we will tell DC residents. We have local elections, obviously. Our Board of Elections will be counting those votes and making those announcements just as soon as possible. One difference I would say is the federal coordination between the Congress and the White House, because we have a national special security event for January 6th. That's a big difference. And I think another thing that's different is that a lot of attention will be paid at state houses leading up to January 6th, where states are certifying their votes and those votes being sent to the Congress.
So given that as Trump supporters who stormed the Capitol on January 6, 2021, do you find law enforcement, or do you expect law enforcement to be mobilized in a more intense manner if the former president loses versus if he wins?
Well, I think that the United States Capitol Police are prepared to ensure a peaceful transfer of power at the Capitol, regardless of the victor.
As we get closer, good morning, Joseph with NBC4. As we get closer and closer to Election Day and Inauguration Day, you, your team, anybody aware of any credible threats inside D.C. at this time?
No, and we have not reported any credible threats. Part of our discussion with the council members is just the levels of watch and how we will turn up our activities based on what's happening on the ground, including our intelligence gathering from federal sources. So let me ask H. Sema kind of talk about what's going on with gathering intelligence.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Clint Osborne. I'm the director of the D.C. Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency, and we work very, very closely with the Metropolitan Police Department at all times through the District of Columbia's Intelligence Fusion Center. We work together to collect information all the time, to vet that information, to analyze it, and then to guide the operations of our activities. And that includes both the security apparatus that I think Chief Smith spoke eloquently about this morning, but also we're constantly looking at all of the operational impact to district operations, whether that's the streets and roadways that our community is transiting on, or that's the services that we provide to our most vulnerable communities. And that's a key part of the intelligence gathering and analysis process for us, is to look at both the security side and also the operational impacts to the district government's operations.
Yes.
Beatrice Peterson, ABC News. Earlier, you guys spoke about preparations for Election Day and the election cycle starting the day after January 6th, which was January 7th. Can you talk about what lessons you guys took away from January 6th that you're applying for this January 6th?
I would say one of the biggest was better coordination among the federal branches. And that is what the National Special Security event status provides. So you have a command and control system that is led by the United States Secret Service that coordinates not only the administration and the Congress, but among local authorities as well. And so that's the structure we're working within. Yes.
Mayor Bowser, have you made a request for the National Guard yet for any of the dates coming up?
We have not yet made a request, but we have been actively involved with DOD with how that planning happens. And when we have a specific request, we will advance it. We may even do something that we haven't done, is kind of advance a preliminary request so that they can start planning. And if we need to dial it up or dial it back, we'll do that.
And then could I ask, I guess, Chief Smith about mutual aid? Given what we're seeing just nationwide with both staffing shortages for police departments around the country, and then I'm guessing, as the mayor alluded to, state houses around the country are going to be more ramped up. Can you talk about the pressures you're having with mutual aid, actually getting enough officers from around the country, if you've had to kind of cast a wider net than normal for this inauguration?
So specifically for the inauguration, we actually started sending out correspondence roughly around the end of June, beginning of July, to gain interest from other law enforcement agencies. Roughly right now we have thousands that are coming from across the United States who have committed to being a part of the inauguration process here in D.C. When you speak specifically about the preparation process and any pressures, we work very, very closely, Mark, as you know, with all of our federal, local, and state partners here within the DMV and outside of the outside of this area. And I think Clint mentioned it very eloquently as well when he stated the intelligence information that we're gathering. Right now, we are not seeing any credible threats here to the District of Columbia on Election Day. And clearly, we have to continue to stay connected and dialed in with our intel team and partners to ensure that nothing comes up. But as of today, we're not seeing anything in that space.
I appreciate it. Could I just follow up? You said you have about 1,000 committed so far.
More than thousands.
Thousands. Do you have a target number that you're looking for? And
We were
what was the
looking
number
for-
last year that you had, or last inauguration?
I'm not sure what we had last inauguration, but clearly based on what occurred last inauguration, we thought it would be appropriate to try to cast our net very far and wide, keeping in mind that some of our other federal partners are also looking for external support. Today, we're close to about 4,000 individual police officers that are expected to provide support for MPD here in the District of Columbia for inauguration.
Do you have a target number that you'd like to get to?
4,000.
4,000.
Yes, sir.
Raphael with WSA9. Mayor, earlier we had some calls made to the election board earlier this year making threats regarding the votes of undocumented immigrants. Have you had any additional, have you been notified of any additional calls? And your message about, the election board getting threats for things that are really out of their control, right? They're just here to deliver their service.
I haven't, but we will follow up with them for sure. And unfortunately, we have seen election officials and other officials targeted by political violence, and we respond to that proactively for sure, and we will continue to do that.
Quickly follow up. You mentioned, discussing when to request a National Guard. Could you just walk through the decision making of what your team obviously has to take into consideration as you're, making this decision?
Well, we like to be as specific as possible. The big thing that we consider is making sure we get a yes when we make the request. So they need specific information, they need numbers, they need locations, and so it's not usual to do it this far out because not all of the perimeters have been established yet, for example. And so as we get more concrete information, we'll look at our own resources, we'll look at law enforcement mutual support that we're getting, and we're looking at the best way to deploy the Guard. And the reason why I would consider a preliminary request is almost assuredly I will be making a request as we get closer is to give DOD as a little bit more time to make their plans. Guardsmen, as you know, and guardsmen and women, they have other jobs frequently. Sometimes they're deployed elsewhere. And DOD, the Department of Defense, through the Secretary of the Army, needs time to make those preparations. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Ellie Silverman with the Washington Post. Thank you so much for taking all of our questions today. I know there's been a lot. I'm wondering, so former President Donald Trump has talked about wanting to take over the city and has been clear in how he views our city. And I was wondering if there have been any plans for what your response would be to a potential Trump presidency again.
Yes.
Could you elaborate, please?
I'm not at this point in time, but we have been actively pushing back, talk about misinformation about the most beautiful city in the world. And we are frequently pushing back on that information about the attacks that the president has made against American cities, the former president, I should say, almost from day one. I happened to be on the podium for his swearing in for what I call the American Carnage speech, where it was a rip-roaring attack on America's cities. So what we need in a president is a president that will partner with cities, invest in cities, and promote the nation's capital as a beacon of what our nation means to the world. And so that's what we're focused on. And strategically and specifically as it relates to your question, it is a reminder that until we become a state, we are susceptible to people trampling on our autonomy and using the United States military against American citizens. And so when we hear the threat that the United States military would be used against American citizens, people should take it seriously, because we had the 82nd Airborne Division on the banks of Washington, D.C. So take it seriously. A president without guardrails can use the United States Army against its citizens in America. Yep.
Mayor Bowser, on the last January 6th, there were issues with federal law enforcement agencies that were brought in from around the country, some of whom did not wear identification. And I'm wondering if you have spoken, if that has been addressed with federal entities to ensure that doesn't happen this time around when different law enforcement agencies, federal law enforcement agencies come to D.C.
Well, our request of the administration, and let me be clear, we will welcome certain federal law enforcement officials to the district, and it may be necessary to expand our law enforcement footprint. And that was the case the last January 6th as well. We had FBI, DEA, we had all of that support. There is, I believe, a requirement by law that the Congress put through some years ago that requires identification. And so that is our expectation, that any law enforcement officials that are coming to the district are following the law.
And then you talked, one of the council members asked, and you talked about not encouraging businesses to board up. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? If we saw a lot of broken windows the last time around and damages to businesses, why would you now tell businesses not to board up in anticipation of these events?
I don't have a reason to. If I had a specific reason to, we would share that information. Okay.
We do one more.
Yep.
Felicia, ABC7 again. Have there been any plans to provide additional support to our dispatch as well, so they're not overwhelmed in this season with all the people coming in? And I know we're also preparing for the unexpected as well.
Yes, we always do. All right. Thank you. Thank you.